What's up, y'all? Everybody good? Yeah. They got me sitting in like the king's throne, which is weird for me. I'm not used to this. But so look, you guys are out of school. You could be in school, so we're gonna keep it light. We're gonna try to make it as not like school as possible while you're not in school, because I'm sure nobody wants to be in school, right? Or I know, right? So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about me. We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about me, where I'm from, how I grew up, and how I went from my neighborhood in Washington, D.C. to being a writer now in New York City. Really weird story, not the normal typical story, right? I wasn't a kid who grew up reading books or anything like that. I was the kind of kid, I grew up in the 80s, first of all, which I know none of you know anything about because you're all very, very young. But the 80s was a really hard time to grow up. Really, really, really tough, just because there were so many negative things happening in our communities, gangs and drugs and all these things that I'm sure you guys have heard about, right? Everybody's familiar with those things, right? So I grew up in the kind of neighborhood where you could see all of that right in your front door, and you had family members who were addicted to drugs, you had family members who were selling drugs, you had family members who were in gangs, you had friends being killed, right? These are really, really bad things that were a normal part of our lives. And the tough part was that I would have to deal with all this craziness and then go to school, and my teachers would tell me to read some books that I didn't want to read, right? They would tell me to read things that I thought was pretty boring. You guys know what I'm talking about? When the teachers are like, oh, we want you to read this in the textbook, we want you to do this, that, and the third. You know, and it's like, oh, I don't want to read it, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm not interested. That was me, right? I was you. Same way, right? I didn't want to read it. Plus, for me, it was hard to read certain stories because my neighborhood was so crazy. So it was like, I don't want to read anything that's not about my neighborhood because that's all I know is my neighborhood, right? So I didn't read any books. No books, not until I was 17 years old, right? Which is terrible. I don't want you all to be like that. How many of y'all have ever read a book? So everybody in here looks like is already ahead of where I was when I was your age. I didn't read any books. So what got me into writing? How many of you know who Queen Latifah is? And how many of y'all know her as an actress? So I knew her as a rapper, all right? Queen Latifah used to be a rapper. You knew her as a rapper?
Well, my parents talked about that.
Yeah? Did they play you any of the music?
They did one time, but I can't remember.
It was probably like it's like UNITY or one of these like that was a song. I would rap it for y'all, but I can't. It's too much. But Queen Latifah was like a star rapper. This is back in 1988, 89, 91, right? This is way before you guys were born. This is before, No Flex Zone. This is before, all the songs that you got. This is before Drake. This is before all of y'all. Who y'all listening to, by the way? Who's y'all favorite rappers? Give me Kendrick Lamar. That's what's up. Kendrick Lamar's what's up. Who you got? Fetty Wap. Yeah, my trap queen. That's your jam. Yeah, I can dig it. Who you got, man? Who you got? Drake. That's what's up. He's talented. Anybody else? What you got, man? Jay-Z. And Kanye West, Jay-Z. All right, so I'm talking about a time when none of them existed, right? Jay-Z was a very young rapper. He was coming up. And hip-hop was this is when hip-hop was all we had, right? So if you grew up in the neighborhood like I grew up, hip-hop was the storytellers for the community, right? Because there were no books at the time that were written about our neighborhoods, right? Very strange thing growing up in the 80s and 90s. There were no books being written in the 80s and 90s for young people that were about the 80s and 90s, especially in neighborhoods like mine. So that was tricky, right? Because then there's nothing for me to read. So we had the music. We had Slick Rick. Y'all know who Slick Rick is? All right. So he was the original storyteller, right? Slick Rick say, Dave the dope fiend shooting dope that don't know the meaning of water nor soap, right? That was like a huge thing because for us it was like, yo, Slick Rick know Dave, right? Like I know Dave, Slick Rick knows Dave, and now I know that he knows my experience growing up in this kind of community, right? Tupac. Y'all know Tupac? Yeah. Huge deal for me. But nobody was a bigger deal than Queen Latifah. And the reason why is because that was the first album that I ever bought. And I remember going, this is back in, y'all know what a cassette is? Yeah, what's a cassette tape? Y'all know what a cassette tape is? a little box with, I guess that's good enough. I guess. So yeah, that's what they used to play music on, right? Old school, right? They used to play music. This is before MP3. This is before YouTube. This is before all of that. This is back when everybody said hip hop would only last for 5 years. This is back when you couldn't win a Grammy for it. You couldn't win any awards for it. This is back when MTV was brand new and only played rock music and Michael Jackson. This is back when you had to pay $3 to see a music video. You had to call a number and pay money to see Fetty Wap on TV, right? Very different time, right? And so we had to go and buy cassette tapes because that's how we got our music. And so I went to the store. It cost $8, right? I bought my cassette tape, and it was my first one. I have an older brother. He had like a bunch of really awesome music, but this was my first cassette tape, and it was Queen Latifah, Black Rain. And I want all of you guys to go home and YouTube this album or Spotify or however y'all get y'all music these days to listen to this album. And what happened was I went home and I took the plastic off the cassette. And you guys don't know this, but it takes like 10 minutes to get plastic off the album. You gotta like really get in there, take the plastic off. I open it up, and they had these things. All the albums came with these things called liner notes. Have you all ever heard of liner notes? No, I know. So liner notes were basically pamphlets that came with every album, like a little program inside of it. And you pull it out, and it's this big. Ask your parents about this. It's this big, and you unfold it, and it's this long. And printed on the pamphlet are the lyrics to every single song, right? So every album came with the lyrics to every song, right? So I got to listen to Queen Latifah rap, and I got to read along with every single lyric. And after the album was over, I got to read along again by myself, this time without the music. And that's when I realized that Queen Latifah and Tupac and Slick Rick and Jay-Z and Nas and all these rappers that I was idolizing, that they were writing poetry. The same poetry that my teachers were trying to teach me in school, they were writing. Different, but the same, right? Langston Hughes, Queen Latifah, different, but the same, right? William Shakespeare, Slick Rick, different, but the same. And that was the thing that changed everything for me. I still wasn't really interested in reading the books that they wanted me to read, but I knew that there was value in poetry. I knew that there was value in storytelling. I knew that there was value in language and in literacy, and that changed my entire life. And that's when I decided, you know what, from here on out, I'm gonna be Queen Latifah and Langston Hughes mixed up together. Langston Latifah, that's gonna be me. I'm gonna be famous, and everybody's gonna check for me, right? So that was it for me. Changed everything. So I went through school. I was writing all my poems. I did all this work. And I ended up graduating from high school, thankfully. Didn't do that well, but I got out. I got to college, and my entire time in college, everyone around me was telling me that I wasn't good enough. They all said that my poems weren't very good. They all said that I wasn't, I should have been a rapper, but I wasn't very good at rapping, right? So the poetry would have to suffice. I thought I was going to be Michael Jordan, but I wasn't that good at basketball either. I thought I was going to be Mike Tyson, but I wasn't that good at fighting either. I thought I was going to be Michael Jackson, but nobody can be Michael Jackson, right? So Queen Latifah was going to have to do, but everybody in school said that I just wasn't a good enough writer. But what changed everything was I had a professor who told me that I didn't have a shot. And he said, look, kid, if you're going to get a degree in English, right, which is what I studied in school, he said, you're going to be a teacher or you're going to be a lawyer, but there's no way that you're going to be a writer. And I was the kind of kid who anytime somebody told me I couldn't do something, that's when I wanted to do it, right? I'm sure a lot of you are that way. Mom says, don't go outside. The first thing you do is try to figure out how to get outside, right? Teachers say, sit down. The first thing you do is stand up, right? Stop talking. And you like, psh, one more time, or just one more word, right? And that's the kind of kid that I was, right? Rebellious a little bit. I just didn't believe it. I had tattoos at 15 years old, right? I was that kid, the kid that they said would not be able to do anything because he was just too rebellious. But sometimes your rebellion can work in your favor. So them telling me I couldn't do it was all I needed to do it. All I needed to believe that I could do it myself. And what changed my life forever and ever after Queen Latifah was Walter Dean Myers. Have you guys ever heard of him? You heard of him? He wrote a bunch of books you all should read. Walter, his son, Christopher Myers, was a very good friend of mine. And I remember living in New York. I was going through the motions. I was working odd jobs in New York. I was working as a teacher for a little bit. I was a school teacher. Can you imagine? Like, man, my class was crazy. I was a middle school teacher. I was a high school teacher. I was a waiter. I was on the radio. I worked for NPR. I did all these jobs. And then I ended up homeless. at the 2008, you guys were not even thinking about anything at that point. But for all the adults in the room, we know that 2008 was a tough time because it's what they call the beginning of the Great Recession, right? And we all lost our jobs and lost our homes, right? And so I lost mine. And I was hanging out with, and so at this point I decided I was going to quit, right? I wasn't going to make it as a writer, you know? I was going to quit. And I was hanging out with Christopher Myers, and he said Walter, his father, was getting old. And he said that nobody's been writing the books about our neighborhoods, right? Where you guys from? Brooklyn? Where in Brooklyn you from? From Coney Island? Where you from? From Marcy? All right. So, who else? Where y'all from? You from Harlem? I used to work on 113th. That's what's up. Who else? Where you from? Brooklyn? Where in Brooklyn you from? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I forget sometimes too. Who you got? You from the Bronx? What part of the Bronx you from? Don't worry about it. It doesn't. The Bronx is the Bronx, you know. Who else? Where you from? Just tell me where y'all from, and I'll tell you why this is important. Anybody else? Where you from? Where in Brooklyn you from? Don't say I don't know. Wait, what you say? From East New York. All right. So let's look at those neighborhoods, right? Let's look at the Bronx. Let's look at Harlem. Where in Harlem you from? What block? What area? Not what block, because I ain't trying to come to your house. Anybody? I don't want you to give your address out to your friends. But like what area? What area? Like North Harlem, South Harlem, the 40s, the 20s, the 30s, the 10s. The 10s. All right. So you look at like the southern part of Harlem, Marcy Projects, you know, East New York, right? These neighborhoods that we all live in, the same kind of neighborhoods that I lived in, those stories are never being told, right? And for you guys, the rappers of my day were telling our stories. The rappers of your day aren't telling your stories, right? So let's say that we fast forward 30 years down the line and you guys are now 30, 40 years old, right? And you say, look, somebody says, I want to know what it was like to be in New York City and be a teenager in New York City in 2015, so I'm going to study your music to find out, and what they hear is Trap Queen. Does that represent you? Right? And what they hear is No Flex Zone. Does that represent you? If a cat come through your hood flashing his diamond watch, does that represent you? No, right? That's not your reality. That doesn't look like your neighborhood at all, right? And so what we have to do, what my job is to tell, and what I learned from Walter and from Chris, is to tell the stories for you guys, to make sure that you don't grow up like me. Because now I'm in my 30s, and I have no literary documentation of my teenage years. It does not exist. Thankfully, we have the music and we have the movies, but there's no book that I can pick up and say, this is what it was like growing up in East New York or in a Marcy Project in 1988, in 1989. Those books do not exist, right? And that's tough. But for you guys, we'll be able to create that by me writing the books that I'm writing, by all of the writers writing the books that we're writing, by you all writing your own stories and telling your own stories. What if we find out 30 years from now, because I put text messaging in a book, right? All of your text messaging language that all your parents and teachers be like, stop writing that way. What is this crazy LOL, you know, ASF, all this stuff that y'all be talking about, right? That I'm learning all the time. My little brother's your age, and he's always teaching me these things. What if we find out 35 years from now, that all the people who were telling you all that it was bad realize that it's brilliant? Because I think it is. What if it's brilliant? What if you all are the most important and the smartest generation to ever live, but if we put it in a book, we save it forever? If I trap the text messaging in a book, it exists forever. If I don't, it doesn't. Right? And 40 years from now, you all will be trying to explain to somebody, and everybody will be clowning y'all, saying that it was silly and it was stupid. But the truth of the matter is that it might be the most important new form of language that we've ever seen, that you all get to create every single day, and that I get to put in the books, right? So my job going forward is to make sure that I'm telling your story, that I'm telling it with integrity, that I'm telling it with authenticity, that you guys can read yourselves in the books as you're living your lives every single day and be proud of who you are, right? That you guys can see yourselves outside of these silly rap songs and these terrible TV shows like Empire, and you can say like, yo, it's not terrible, but it ain't you. Right? It's not terrible, but it's not you. And you can say, yo, this represents me. This is more like me. This represents me, my mother, my father, my brother and sister, my hood, and I'm proud of it, and I'm not ashamed. Y'all feel me? 1 second. Y'all feel me? Everybody with me? Yeah. All right. Any questions? What you got, man? Is it a movie? The books I write? The Boy in the Striped Pajamas? That's not my book, though. But that book is a movie. Yeah, I wrote The Boy in the Black Suit, but The Boy in the Striped Pajamas is a good movie. It's mad sad, yo, but it's good. It's a true story. Anybody else? Any questions? Yeah.
What advice would you give them? They're going to publish their own books.
You're going to publish your own books.
Well, they're actually publishing a book. So
Oh, yeah.
what advice would you give them as they're finalizing the final draft of their story?
But my greatest piece of advice would be work really, really, really hard on the editing. Are you guys editing? Are you guys working on editing? That's the rough part, right? It's like you write the book and then somebody tells you got to write some more. You know, you got to change it. Work hard on that part. There's nothing worse than reading the book and there's misspelled words in the book. You know, it's, you know, the sentences are all messed up. Make sure that you double check, triple check, quadruple check your work to make it the best that it can be. Perfection first, right? Perfection before publication, right? Perfect the work before you publish it. Make sure it's the best that you can get it. Yeah.
Okay, when you wrote your book, did you write it as the voice you feel like you write it as an
I wrote it, you know, I didn't write it out of anger. I think I wrote it out of like necessity, right? Like it was something I needed to get out. A lot of the work that I'm writing are things that are stories that I grew up with, my own life, things that I experienced that I just need other people to know because I know other people are going through it, right? For instance, this book that I'm going to give you guys today, The Boy in the Black Suit, it's all about like a young man who loses his mom to breast cancer. His mom passes away, right? And he has to deal with that. He's 17 years old and he has to deal with the fact that his mom is gone. And in my life, I grew up when I was your age. I started to lose people. You know, and by the time I was 18, I had been to more funerals than most people go to in their lives, whether it be funerals of loved ones, funerals of my friends, gang funerals, right? I'd been through it all. And I know I'm not the only kid who goes through that. And so I wanted to write a story about those young people who are dealing with that kind of weight, you know, and that it's okay. So it just comes from a place of like honesty and necessity, because I want to make sure that you guys have something more than just The Incredible To Kill a Mockingbird to read. You know, there's other books that are just as important that can affect your life. Yes, you got all the questions. Yeah.
Did you dress in black?
Pardon me?
Did you dress in black?
Did I dress in black on purpose? I just wear black all the time because it's easy. We live in a dirty city, so I like to keep it black. That way I don't get dirty, right? If I got on white, everybody gonna know I'm dirty. If I got on black, I could be dirty, but you ain't gonna never know. You know? So I wear black every day, all day. My whole closet is black. And it's easy to get dressed. I don't got to think about it, right? Everything matches. You know? Anybody else? Anybody else? Any question? You can ask any question you want, by the way. I'm wide open. It doesn't matter. Any teachers too as well? Yeah.
What neighborhood did you grow up
I grew up in Washington, D.C. in a neighborhood called Anacostia. And this is back when this is a neighborhood that everybody was afraid to come to. They called it east of the river. You know, it's like you don't go east of the river, right? You stay on this side, but you never go east of the river because when you go over there, you might not make it back west of the river, right? But, you know, everybody who grows up, like you grew up in Marcy Projects, right? And you know how you hear people talk about Marcy Projects, but when you grow up there, it ain't like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's your normal life. It ain't no big deal, right? It's like you hear about people on the radio or like whatever hood you from, everybody else from the outside of that hood looks at it like, yo, son, you from the hood. I don't know how you making it, son. You like, yo, I'm fine. Like my everyday life is fine. I go to school, I come home, I eat dinner, I play outside. You know, like it's not, these neighborhoods are, if they're your neighborhoods, they're your neighborhoods and it's no big deal, you know? Yep. Was I in a gang? No, man. No. Ain't nobody about to be shooting at me, you know? I wasn't in no gang. You know why? Because I think gangs, the whole gang thing is silly. I talk to kids in juvenile and in prison all the time. And you know what they tell me? They tell me, yo, Mr. Jason, man, we got to live by the code, man, G code, which I know y'all know this, right? No snitching. Y'all hear all this, right? Let me tell y'all something. Y'all are old enough to understand this. Let me tell y'all something. Gang, this is the issue with that kind of stuff. There is no loyalty. Right? So like you pledge your loyalty to somebody who will not pledge his loyalty to you. Because when it all goes down, the first thing, when it all goes down and you get in trouble for something that your brother, your gangmate did, the first thing he gonna say is no snitching. Right? But if he was really your brother, he wouldn't tell you that. He would take the rap for himself. If he was really your friend, right? A real friend don't let you go down, right? So I knew that very young. I watched my older brother go through a bunch of drama and I was like, yeah, I ain't really the gang thing wasn't for me. I got siblings and I got friends. I got enough of a gang myself, and we really love each other, you know. Yep. What'd you say? Were any of my friends in the gang? Sure. Sure. A lot of my friends are also not alive. Yeah.
You write every day right now? Is it part of your daily, like, you still write poetry?
Every day. I write. I get up at 7 o'clock in the morning every single day. And I write from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the afternoon every single day, Monday through Friday. So about 6 hours every single day, which is a lot of work. But I write a novel every 10 weeks. Because of that, right? That's my process. And so because of that, I'm able to write a lot of books. I've written 10 novels over 3 years, which you guys will see. They're all coming out, I guess, in the next 2 or 3 years. But that's the process for me, like a constant sort of work. And that's because of Walter. That's what Walter's advice to me was before he died, was every single day. And this is the rate that you'll be able to produce work. And if you produce work at this rate, they'll never be able to close the door on you. All your books will come out. You know, that was sort of his advice to me. Yep. The process of publishing, it was weird. I moved to New York. I got published in New York because this is where all the publishing companies are, right? So I moved to New York when I was 20 years old. And I hustled for a very long time, like just in the street trying to sell my poems and my stuff, and because I didn't know how to get a book published. And then a friend of mine was on a TV show, was on Law and Order, and was on The Wire and all this stuff. And he had an agent, and he was like, "Hey man, give me your book. I'm gonna give it to my agent as a gift." And then his agent ended up passing it to her friend, and then I got a phone call. It was like a really kind of fluke situation. And then I had a book come out when I was 21. That was my first one. And then I had nothing else come out until I was 27. So I got a book come out, and then I hit rock bottom, and nothing ever happened again. And then 27 came, and I started to put out the novels and all that kind of stuff. But it was like I got really lucky, honestly. I got really lucky. Yep. When I get started writing books, the first book I put together, I was 16, and it was just of the poetry that I have been working on for the last 8 years. And that same book, pieces of that book, is what they published when I was 21. But when I was 16, that was the first time I remember looking at my mom in the face and saying, "Mom, I'm getting ready to write a book," and she laughed, right? Because it was like, yeah, right. And then I did. I sat at the computer and I tapped out 80 pages of like poetry and all this stuff over the course of like 2 or 3 months. And I sold those books out of the trunk of my car and paid my final year of college with it. And I used it as sort of a way to make money. Instead of selling drugs, I was selling books, and selling poems, right? And like that was another way to do it. Yep. Yeah. What you say? Oh no, he was 75 years old. Yeah, this guy that we're talking about, Walter Dean Myers, he was 75 years old. He wrote 100 books. They're all in here. They're all downstairs. Tons of books that you all should read. I'm pretty much just carrying on his legacy, the best that I can. He was doing this well before I was. We got time for one more question. Make it a good one. Yes.
Do you think you could have done this without going through all of that?
No, the answer is no. That's a good question. The reality is that the things that, and I want you all to understand this, all the things you're going through, the good, the bad, the ugly, the pain, the funny stuff, all the craziness, it's all necessary and it's all important to making you the person that you are and will become. And so I look at my life and all the craziness that I went through, my family, all the silly stuff that I had been through, the people that I lost, and all of it sort of works out now because I get to tell their stories, and it's fuel for the fire. If you ain't been through nothing, you can't talk about it. But going through things is what creates the wisdom and the knowledge and the information for you to then give it back to other people. So that's it. Thank you guys so much. You guys have been great. I appreciate it.